trade professionals. We are back with another news trade roundup. I always mess up the name. Trade news roundup. You know what I mean. We're back with another roundup, and we have some topics to share with y'all. I'm here with Lalo and Andy, as always, usual, right? Hi, how are you guys?
Good morning.
Doing great.
Awesome.
It is cold here, Anik. I don't know, it's like, as we would say, it put bumps on the goose and a heartbeat out here.
It's cold here too.
Wow. The humidity is always high in the Memphis area, and so, I mean, it'll chill you to the bone.
Yeah, that's how it is in Germany. It's so cold. Like, it's just so much colder there. It just feels so much colder.
It's just, it makes a difference. How about down in El Paso there, my friend?
Yeah, it gets down to the 20s overnight. So
yeah, so we're gonna go straight into the articles. The first one is a little bit an overall outlook into the 2024, and we've done this before, but it's an article by Global Trade Mag, and it's basically talking about how businesses need to adapt to the changing geopolitical landscape and protect their supply chains amidst rising tensions and trade conflicts, which, you know, we talk about every week, I feel like. So kind of my question is, how can businesses adapt to the evolving geopolitical landscape and protect their supply chains during these tensions? So do you guys have any suggestions, any, trainings or something to guide these companies?
I just want to, comment or point to everybody to the most recent episode that we had on. Actually, it was a week ago with former Secretary Alan Burson. Only because he touched on this. He touched on how companies need to adapt to new or current trends or current issues. In this case, we're talking about geopolitical issues and what's going on with the with like BRICS and other regions coming together and kind of making everybody a little nervous because of their supply chains, et cetera. But he didn't necessarily talk about that exactly or to that point. He mostly talked about how in this society, in this current world, we need to be open and adapt to using like technology and using like sharing data and being able to provide the information to authorities and business partners as well.
You need to look at your suppliers and consider that if any of them are caught up in any of these geopolitical situations and regions that are tense, have the potential to become even strained more, then you need to be looking right now at changing your sources or diversifying your sources. So in other words, find additional sources for the goods that you're looking at if they're not here in the U.S. or in Canada or in North America. You need to find other sources. The other thing is on this, in dealing with all that, is the use of technology, is in trying to track your cycle times and your orders and your purchase orders and things of that nature that's going on, and your transit times as far as the goods and clearing them to customs and all. But then the other is going to come into play with sanctions. As the BRICS expansion goes on and some of these geopolitical situations go on, then the U.S. and other considered Western economies will more than likely add additional sanctions. Well, if that happens, sanctions, that means you cannot do business with certain parties, or you are very restricted in what you can and cannot do business with, whether you're buying or selling. I mean, there's other things that you can look at, but you've got to play that out and do that now. So that not if, but when things get even tougher, you're prepared.
I think that was a good good points. think it was a good article to start with, kind of talking about the overall, challenges that we're going to face in 2024 and that companies have to take action on. It's better to be proactive than at the end, pay millions of dollars or having to shut down or whatever is going to happen. So we're going straight into the other article, which is talking about the deactivation of Section 232 exclusions. I think it's aluminum and steel by CBP impacts businesses reliant on imported goods affected by the tariffs. So how does this deactivation by CBP impact businesses, especially those reliant on the imported goods affected by the tariffs?
By the who?
Tariffs?
Oh, tariffs. I heard terrorists. I was like, I don't think terrorists are importing anything.
No, I said tariffs. I mean, terrorists, really, that's probably worse.
Well, quite simply, I guess, and I'll put it in simple terms, and I'll let Andy take over because he has a lot more, regulatory or information stuff like that. But pretty simply said, when we do training here at Global Training Center, we one of the things that we touch on, of course, are like 232s and 301s, different tariff restrictions depending on the class that we have, of course, But one of the things that we always talk about is that there are exclusions to your importations, meaning you're able to exclude a certain quantity. So let's just say, well, a certain quantity. Let's just say, once you hit that threshold, those exclusions go away, and basically you need to start paying duties, okay, or tariffs, like you said, Anik. What's happening is that importers are importing at a high volume, and so according to this article, what's happening is that they're importing at a high volume that they reach 100%, but because they're importing so much, they go beyond the 100%, and customs may not catch it until after the fact, only because everything's already in, and so they have to go back and they have to go through all that trouble of imposing that tariff on, and make them pay for those duties. So right now, I think the article said it was 35 million or something that is left unpaid because it's just things that happen afterwards. It's like that's what's happening. And so they said, instead of us flagging it at 100%, once they reach 100% imports, let's flag it at 95% because now we have a 5% buffer. And we tell them at 95%, that's it. You can't import anymore duty free or whatever. You can't do the exemption. I shouldn't call it duty free. You can't do the exemption.
Why? I was thinking of duty free. What would you call it?
Well, there may be duty on the goods. It's like aluminum and steel products. So there may be, it may be duty free. It may be, like 3%, 5%, whatever. But then the 232 tariffs add another, and if I'm not mistaken, isn't it 25%?
Yeah, it's something like 25%. So it does add more. So that's why I said, I'm sorry, not duty free, because it cannot be duty free. The 232s are going to add a significant amount just to protect those importations. So, but yes, and so that's what I meant.
If you are wanting to try and make a difference, then you need to look to see who's involved regarding the deal about the 232 tariffs. You got a couple things here with the Department of Commerce that is heavily involved with, pushing for and administrating these tariffs. But from a legislative perspective, from a congressional perspective, you need to have your regulatory and industry affairs folks, or regulatory affairs, if you will, reaching out to both the House and the Senate oversight committees on international relations, on international trade or trade in general. Whether or not you feel like they're making any progress or not, you got to identify them, look at them, and see where they're going to go and get involved with it. If you got some questions on that, reach out to me because I'll be more than happy. Because I tell you, some of this stuff makes me madder than a wet end.
I don't know where you come up with those and with those analysis. What is it called? Like those terms. That's so funny.
Okay, let's just call it what it is. Everybody calls them Andyisms.
Well,
Andyism.
I'm the perfect idiot to give the Andyism, right?
That's a good one.
Anyway.
I didn't say idiot. I said idioms.
I know that.
Yeah, I was like, okay.
I'm sorry. I was hoping somebody would say that because I needed to bring in that joke. I don't know if y'all heard that. Have you seen that movie, The Pink Panther, with Steve Martin?
No.
And then,
I think no.
It's very, very old. It's super old, very old. Yeah. And then they said that word idiom, and he says, "Me, sir, I am not an idiom."
That's Andy.
That's me. There you
go. Okay. Well, the third article we want to talk about today is talking about how Florida plans to import prescription drugs from Canada with approval from U.S. regulators, aka FDA, potentially providing more affordable medications to consumers. Sounds good because affordable medications, right, doesn't sound too bad, but I know this is just a different situation. What?
Oh, I'm telling you what, it's like,
so I'm ready.
Lila, you might want to get on this. It's like,
I'm ready to hear your response. I'm open to it. Am I totally gonna be obsessed with your? No, just kidding.
Lila, you got anything first? Because I'm gonna jump in on this one.
I guess just in simple terms, and of course, again, very simple. Florida recognized that the drugs, prescription drugs available in Canada are cheaper. So they asked the FDA, can we import them into the state of Florida so we can sell them here to make it cheaper for, residents? And
well, Canada's a very different country, though. Like, I'm confused.
Well, that's why they're asking permission to.
No. I'll challenge you on that. Their standards are very similar as far as their drugs and things of that nature. Very similar to the FDA. Matter of fact, the U.S. and Canada both for decades now have talked about trying to come up with a way to reciprocate the approval. So in other words, if Health Canada approves a drug, it would then be approved in the U.S. and vice versa. So if the FDA has a brilliant,
I can see that. I feel like Canada is a little bit closer to maybe Europe on their drugs things, maybe.
Well, but here's the thing. First off, this is a great deal because Florida has worked out something and they went through the formal bureaucracy that they had to apply with the FDA, and the FDA gave approval for Florida to move forward with importing goods or buying goods, if you will, from Canadian suppliers. And here's the interesting thing that I found, that the FDA commissioner made comment that Florida will still have to ensure that that the supply chain will be kept intact and that the integrity of the drugs and all that's going into play there. I got to tell you, I'm sitting there looking at that. You're talking about a bunch of hogwash. That's exactly what that is that it's the manufacturer of the goods where they need to come into play. That is like, is this manufacturer a reputable one? Are they meeting good manufacturing processes and practices and all that? Once you do it on a broad scale, it's like the FDA manufacturers, the drug manufacturers, the FDA should approve them or not. But what's happening is Big Pharma is running interference on this. Why? Because they have a hold and they're holding the U.S. citizens hostage on higher drug prices. It's the same drug that if you look at it in the U.S. and what it sells for versus the same drug that's manufactured in Canada, and you look at what they're selling in Canada, it's half the price of what's in the U.S. Well, Big Pharma's got a hold on all that. And the way they're doing it is they clamp down on generic drugs coming in. Oh, it's like you can't get approved as a manufacturer for a generic drug. Why? Because Big Pharma has worked with the Safe Drug Act way back to make it almost impossible. All this to say, what I'm getting at, folks, is that the FDA is acting more like the Department of Commerce than the true FDA.
Well, that's like everything though here. It's like all about money. Like, I mean, because it's funny because, I mean, okay, we can look at the FDA. Let's look at it and see all the things that are in our foods, all the toxins and stuff that's not even allowed anywhere else, just here. So like why? Well, because it's cheaper and people are going to pay. So like, but it all comes back because I mean, they need to make money somehow. It's just a little bit flawed and it's not really for the people. You know what I mean?
Well, that's where I'm saying it's like coming back to the drugs. It's the same thing. Is that if these same drugs that are allowed to be imported in from foreign sources, in this case Canada, why couldn't they just be okay if they can go into Florida? Why does another state, let's say Wyoming or California or Texas, have to apply to do the same thing?
It's also a little confusing though. So they're going to buy it cheaper, right? Let's say they're going to buy it cheaper. So these companies can buy it cheaper. What are they going to do? Sell it cheaper? You think too?
Well, they're already buying. Yeah. But it's like here's where the problem is.
Because they could even make more profit if they sell at the same price.
Yeah, but no, let's stop for a minute. The problem is that Big Pharma has clamped down so that there's less competition. Let me tell you, the market will take care of this appropriately. But when you have fair level playing fields and you have open competition with this, then you're going to have prices come down and it will be okay. But instead, they're artificially raised because Big Pharma is standing in the way. From a regulatory affairs perspective, they've pushed their legislation. They've got their representatives and senators in their back pocket. They've got the FDA that they have heavily influenced and all of that. Now, understand that FDA has a very difficult job. I get it. I understand it. And there's some good people within the FDA, but their bureaucratic process is full of beans. And it's one of those things that I'm going to tell you what, folks need to get mad enough to say, I'm tired of this. Aren't you tired of getting screwed over when you go to get a prescription and it is astronomically high and you're looking at it going, why? And yet you could go down to Mexico. Excuse me. I don't know why my throat's all caught. This has gotten me choked up. I mean, it's like, it's got a burr under my saddle. I'm telling you, this irritates me. And it's just like, man, it just gets all over me because you can go down to Mexico or you can go up to Canada, North America, those two countries right next door and get the same drug and get it for a fraction as compared to what you're getting here. Well, what's the difference? You don't have Big Pharma in the way of that. So it's, then they'll come back and go, oh, well, there's a risk on some of these things. I understand that. So if there is a good corporate citizen that's willing to cross the T's, dot the I's and say, we have good manufacturing processes and we have integrity in our supply chain and all that, why shouldn't they be able to sell their product into the U.S.? Because Big Pharma's patents have expired. That's what we're talking about here. There are a lot of medications that have expired. And so Big Pharma no longer has the if you will, the monopoly on that particular drug. I get it because they need to recoup. They spent the research and development, or R&D as we would say, in developing the medications. And that's what the patent's there for, to help them recoup their costs and make a profit. They're first to market. Great. And then as time goes on, the generic drug comes into play.
Yeah. I mean, I also think just to look at Canada is operated very differently than the United States, right? Like their healthcare, we go into healthcare, we go into all those things very differently. You won't agree with some of those sides, but the drugs need to be cheaper. So I think there's a hot like medium that we can't find here that they may have found over there with cheaper drugs. I'm not saying that Canada is so much better, but there's differences. So
well, I will say this,
but I'm all for lower prices.
Yeah, to your point, I will say some of the things are different. The medical systems are very, very similar, if not almost identical. What's different is how it's paid for. In Canada, it's socialized medicine. Here in the States, it's almost semi-socialized because of some of the craziness, but then you have the private insurance and those kinds of things. So there's a difference in how it's paid for. Now, I will tell you, the Canadian healthcare system, they're constantly in there complaining about the cost of the medical, but it's covered by the taxpayers. But they're constantly in dealing with the same issues that we are, where rising costs. The difference is some of what they can negotiate and whatnot. So I'll just tell you, in the U.S. right now, the reason why a lot of drugs are because there's a lack of competition. And that right there is where if you're going to say, I'm tired of this, and you're a citizen and you want to do something about it, find a representative in the oversight committee of the FDA or in the House or Senate, and send them like, why is it that there's a lack of competitions for generic drugs in the U.S.? And they can come back with but you got to start there. And if you're a company that's dealing with it, or a distributor, or want to do some of that stuff, you need to be hammering away at that. Now, big pharma, man, they're tough, and they will clamp down on some of these things, and I've seen them do it before. So it's unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Yeah. And you know what? That's how we're going to end the episode. Well, actually, food for thought. Let's just maybe get the food ingredients right, and we won't need medicine, aka hormones and stuff in your meats. We don't care. That's not good for anyone. Anyways, that's what I have to say about that. But yeah,
well, you had me had me all riled up today.
Yeah, it's something to talk about, and maybe we can have someone from the FDA on, and it would be a very good conversation, especially with this topic.
Oh, I'd love that. Well, I'll tell you something else. One of the things we may need to do is talk to my buddy, not Vincent, Dominic Veneziano. Bring him on. He'd be a good one to talk about.
Anyone. I mean, yeah, the FDA is not inspiring to me, but it's like, I would love to learn more about them.
There really are some really good folks at the FDA, and I'd love to talk with them. So here's an open invitation. I think Carol Cave has recently left the FDA. That should be another one that would have been a good one. But hey, folks, if you know anybody from the FDA, or any of you that are listening from the FDA, and you want to come on and talk about it, let's talk turkey. Come on. So
turkey. Yeah, let's talk about the turkey that's huge and filled with hormones. Just kidding. You started it. I'm kidding. I'm just.
Annika, I love you. You're great.
I'm so kidding. I'm kidding. I still eat turkey. So, anyways, this was a great episode. And we went well over time. So. Again, thank you so much for listening. Let us know what you thought of this episode. Chime in. You can send us a private message if you don't feel comfortable sharing these things out loud or out in the public. And we're newly on YouTube. So we have a YouTube channel now, and we are sharing trade gems, little funny skits, not skits, but skits from the episodes, and also the full episodes on video, not the news ones, but the regular ones.
Oh, so I can only imagine you guys doing something with some of the, as you call them,
no, they're so fun, and they have funny headers and stuff. So please check us out and refer us, send it to your friends, and that's it for today. Have a great week, and we will see you next Monday. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.